There are exactly 3 things you need to know about me before this story makes any sense. 1. My name is Shin Iseul, 24 years old, Omega, certified, documented, biologically undeniable, and currently in possession of a forged beta designation card that cost me 4 months of savings and a deeply uncomfortable conversation with a man who went by the name Uncle Brick and operated out of a print shop in Yulgiro that smelled like ink and bad decisions. 2. I am not a victim of circumstance. I want to be very clear about that. Everything I have done, every corner I have cut, every room I have walked into wearing someone else's identity, I chose, deliberately, with full awareness of the consequences. I am not someone things happen to. I am someone who looks at a situation, calculates the odds, and then does whatever he decides to do regardless of what the odds say. 3. I have never, in my entire adult life, been afraid of an alpha. That last one is going to become relevant very quickly. The job listing had described it as a position in administrative coordination at the Haeryun Group's Seoul headquarters. Competitive salary. Discretion required. Candidates with experience managing high-pressure environments preferred. It had not described the Haeryun Group as a front organization held together by a forced alliance between 4 of Seoul's most dangerous criminal syndicates. It had also not mentioned that all 4 syndicate heads would be occupying the same building. Same floor. 4 offices arranged like compass points around a central shared space that someone had decorated with expensive art and soft lighting, as if that would make any of this feel normal. I found all of this out during my background research, which I did after I accepted the job, because I accepted the job first and asked questions second. This is my primary personality flaw. I am working on it. I am not working very hard on it. The morning of my first day, I stood in my bathroom mirror at 6:40 a.m. and gave myself the only pep talk I was willing to give myself. You have survived worse, I said. This was objectively true. You are prepared, I said. This was subjectively true. For alphas in one room is completely manageable, I said. This one I said with less conviction. But I said it anyway, because the alternative was going back to bed and I had already ironed this shirt. I took the bus to the Haeryun Group building in central Seoul because I liked the bus. Specifically, I liked that the bus was mine. My schedule, my window seat, my 34 minutes of watching the city wake up before I had to walk into whatever today was going to be. The building was tall, glass-fronted, the kind of architecture that communicated power without saying a single word about it. I had looked it up on maps the night before. I had timed the walk from the bus stop. I had memorized the floor plan from the building permit documents, which are public record, a fact that more people should know. I was ready. The lobby guard checked my ID, the beta one, the good forgery, the one that had passed 6 previous employment screenings without a single raised eyebrow, and handed me a visitor badge and directed me to the 19th floor. I rode the elevator alone, adjusted my jacket, looked at my reflection in the elevator doors and told my reflection to behave. My reflection looked unconvinced. The 19th floor opened into a reception area that was genuinely beautiful. I don't say that lightly. I am not easily impressed by spaces. But whoever had designed this floor had understood something important about the psychology of intimidation, that the most effective version of it didn't announce itself. There were no sharp edges, no aggressive displays of wealth. Just quiet, considered luxury. Stone floors, low lighting, plants that were real and clearly well cared for, art on the walls that was interesting rather than expensive. The kind of space that made you feel, subtly, continuously, that you were slightly underdressed for whatever was about to happen. I was not underdressed. I had dressed for exactly this. The administrative coordinator's desk was in the center of the floor. Not beside one office or near one wall, the actual center. Equidistant from all 4 corner offices, each with its own glass front, each currently dark except for one. I set my bag down. I looked at the 4 offices. I sat down at the desk that was going to require me to, effectively, be visible from every direction at all times, and I pulled out my onboarding folder and I started reading. The first rule I wrote for myself that morning, on the inside cover of my notebook in small, neat handwriting. Do not be the most interesting thing on this floor. I broke that rule in the first 20 minutes. The first one arrived at 7:52 a.m. I knew it before the elevator opened because his scent preceded him, sandalwood and cold iron. the specific combination that the older Omega education texts described as a dominant alpha marker, which in practice meant, this is someone who has never in his life had to raise his voice to get a room's attention. He simply walked in and the room gave it to him. His name, I would confirm later from the org chart I had memorized the previous evening, was Kang Do-ha. 31 years old. Head of the Kang Syndicate, which operated primarily in logistics and import control across 3 port cities. He was taller than his profile suggested, built like someone who had been trained rather than born into his body, with the kind of face that would have been extraordinary if it weren't so deliberately closed. Not cold, closed. There was a difference. Cold people didn't care. Closed people cared very much and had made a decision about it. He stopped when he saw me. I looked up from my onboarding folder. He looked at me the way people looked at something they had not been informed about and were now calculating how they felt about it. Not hostile, just assessing. The kind of look that made lesser people want to explain themselves. I did not explain myself. New coordinator, I said. Shin Iseul. I start today. A pause. His eyes moved to my badge, then back to my face. You're early. I'm always early, I said. It's a personality flaw. Something moved behind his expression. Not amusement, not quite. The shape that amusement would occupy if it were allowed to exist. He turned and walked to the northwest corner office without another word. The door opened, he went inside, and the lights came on. I looked back at my folder. That went fine, I told myself. I was not sure that was accurate. The second arrived at 8:15, and I heard him before I saw him, which was the opposite of how Kang Do-ha had worked. Where Do-ha arrived like a pressure change in the atmosphere, this one arrived with noise, not loud noise, not aggressive noise, but movement noise. The sounds of someone who occupied space unapologetically and had never once considered whether their presence was convenient for anyone else. Yeo Sang-won, 29. Head of the Yeo network, which I understood to operate primarily in information. Financial intelligence, surveillance contracts, data brokerage. The kind of work that made other criminals nervous because it meant someone always knew more than you thought they did. He was wearing a light gray suit and carrying 2 coffee cups, neither of which was for me, I would discover. He stopped at my desk and looked at me with a grin that landed somewhere between genuine and weaponized. You must be the new one, he said. I must be, I agreed. Sang-won, he said. He didn't extend a hand. Just the name, dropped like a card on a table. You're going to have a complicated first week. I've had complicated first weeks before. Not like this one. He said it pleasantly, the way people said things that were true but that they found privately entertaining. Then he took both his coffees to the northeast corner office, sat down, and immediately began making phone calls. I added Yeo Sang-won, knows more than he shows to my mental file, and kept reading. The third came at 8:40 and was, genuinely, the most striking person I had seen in recent memory, which I noted as a fact and then immediately quarantined in the part of my brain labeled not relevant to professional functioning. Oh Jin-hyuk, 28. Head of the O organization, which ran entertainment, hospitality, and I suspected a number of other things that didn't appear in any financial disclosure. He walked with the particular ease of someone who had grown up being watched and had made peace with it long ago. Not performing exactly, just comfortable in visibility in a way that most people never fully achieved. He stopped at my desk and looked at me and then, unexpectedly, smiled. Not the practiced smile I had anticipated. Something smaller than that. More real. Finally, he said. I blinked. I'm sorry. The last 3 coordinators lasted a combined total of 9 months, he said. The third one left a resignation letter on the printer and didn't wait for anyone to read it. He tilted his head slightly. You look like someone who reads the room before they panic. I read the room and then I decide whether to panic later, I said. In private. Efficiently. He laughed. It was a good sound, open, unguarded. Oh Jin-hyuk, he said. Southeast office. My door is always open. Literally. I have a condition about closed spaces. He walked away and his door did, in fact, stay open for the entire rest of the day. I sat with Oh Jin-hyuk, disarming on purpose or by accident, unclear, and moved on. The fourth arrived at 9:03 and stood at the elevator for 11 seconds before walking to his office without stopping at my desk at all. I noticed this. I also noticed the scent. Dark oud and something underneath it that I couldn't immediately categorize. Not cold, not warm. More like still. The specific stillness of deep water that looked calm because the movement was happening below the surface where you couldn't see it. Nam Tae-jin, 30, head of the Nam Group. The one that the criminal intelligence reports I had access through channels I will not describe referred to consistently as the one you don't see coming. He sat down in the Southwest office without looking at me once. I looked at him once. Then I looked at my desk and wrote the second rule in my notebook. Nam Tae-jin is the most dangerous person on this floor. Treat him accordingly. I underlined it twice. Here is what I learned about them in the first 3 days, purely through observation, purely through the specific gift of paying attention that I had developed over years of needing to know where I stood before a room could tell me. Kang Do-ha arrived first every single day. Not second, not sometimes first, always without variation. His office lights came on between 7:45 and 7:55 regardless of what the previous day had contained, which told me he operated on a schedule so internal it had nothing to do with external circumstances. He took his coffee black. He ate lunch at his desk at 12:30 without exception. He did not make small talk. He was not cold. I kept coming back to this distinction. He was simply someone who did not see the point of words that didn't carry information and had organized his entire life accordingly. On day 2, he placed a document on my desk without explanation. A contract draft, dense with legal language, flagged in 3 places with adhesive tabs. He walked back to his office. I read it, found the clause he had flagged, identified the error in section 7.3, corrected it, had it back on his desk in 18 minutes. He came out of his office, looked at the document, looked at me, went back to his office. I'm choosing to believe that was a thank you. Yeo Sang-won did not operate on a schedule. He operated on momentum. You could tell what kind of day he was having by how he moved through the floor. Fast and bright meant something interesting was happening. Slow and amused meant something had already happened and he was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. He talked more than the others, but I noticed that the talking was curated. He said a great deal and revealed very little. He asked questions that felt like conversation but were structured like intelligence gathering. On day 1 he asked me where I was from. On day 2 he asked me what I had done before this. On day 3 he asked me whether I had any family in Seoul, and I looked at him very directly and said, "Are you filing a dossier on me or making friends?" He had stared at me for a full 2 seconds. Then, both potentially. "Does that bother you?" "Only if the dossier is inaccurate," I said. He had smiled at that. The real one, not the practiced one. I had filed it away. Oh Jin-hyuk, true to his word, kept his door open. This meant I could hear his calls, his music, his occasional low conversations with people who came to visit him. And they did visit, more than the others, a quiet but steady flow of people who seemed to genuinely want to be in the room with him rather than simply needing something from him. He brought me coffee on day 2 without asking if I wanted it, set it on the edge of my desk while I was mid-email, and disappeared back into his office before I could do more than look up. The coffee was exactly how I took it. I had not told him how I took it. When I asked him about it later, he said, "You made yourself coffee on your first morning." I watched. I had not known he was watching. That was the thing about Oh Jin-hyuk. You thought he was easy because he moved like he was, and then you realized the ease was itself a form of attention. He noticed everything and let you think he was too relaxed to bother. Nam Tae-jin in 3 days said 11 words to me directly. I counted. Day 1, nothing. Day 2, passing my desk. "The printer on this floor needs recalibration." It did. I had it fixed by noon. Day 3, when I had reorganized the shared filing system and left a summary on each desk. He read the summary, walked to my desk and said, "Who authorized this?" "No one," I said. It needed doing. A pause. "It's correct," he said. 8 words. That was it. He walked back to his office. The thing about Nam Tae-jin was that he watched without appearing to watch. Kang Do-ha's assessments were visible, you could see him calculating. Nam Tae-jin's were invisible. You simply became aware at intervals that he had been paying attention the whole time and you hadn't noticed until you were already inside the attention. I found this, professionally speaking, very inconvenient. I found this, in some other way I refused to examine, somewhat difficult to stop thinking about. On day 4, a courier arrived at 10:15 with a package for the Haeryun Group Partnership Council, their official registered name, the one they used for anything that needed to exist on paper. I signed for it. I set it on my desk. I looked at it. This was the moment I should tell you something I have been leaving out. I am an Omega. I have already established this. What I have not established is that my Omega biology comes with a specific additional feature that I have spent a considerable portion of my adult life trying to manage, suppress, or at minimum make useful rather than simply catastrophic. I feel intent. Not emotions exactly. I'm not reading minds. I'm not some kind of supernatural creature from a fantasy novel. But I feel the weight of intention in a room the way some people feel humidity. When someone is angry, I don't just read it on their face. I feel the specific texture of it in the air before they've arranged their expression. When someone is lying, there's a particular quality to the space around them, a sort of displacement. When someone means harm, premeditated, deliberate, organized harm, it has a signature. Cold and very, very patient. The envelope on my desk had that signature. I did not open it. That was not my job. I simply looked at it and understood, with the quiet certainty of someone whose instincts had never been entirely wrong, that whatever was inside that envelope was the beginning of something, and that the something was not good. I distributed it at 10:30, one copy to each office. Kang Do-ha read his standing up. His jaw tightened by a single degree and he set it on his desk face down. Yeo Sang-won read his and made a call immediately, low and fast and clipped in a way that was entirely unlike his usual voice. Oh Jin-hyuk read his and his open door closed for the first time since I had known him. I heard the lock engage. Nam Tae-jin was last. I knocked, entered, set the document on his desk because he was standing at his window back to me. I was turning to leave when he said, without moving, "Did you read it?" I stopped. "No," I said. "It wasn't mine to read." A silence. He was still facing the window, the city sprawling behind the glass around him. "But you know," he said. Not a question. I considered lying. I discarded it. "I know there's something coming," I said carefully. "I don't know the details." He turned then. His face was composed. That was the word. Not blank, not cold. Composed in the way that very old buildings were composed, the kind that had survived things and were still standing and didn't need to tell you about it. He looked at me for a long moment. "Go back to your desk," he said. I went back to my desk. My second rule, I decided, needed a clarification. Nam Tae-jin is the most dangerous person on this floor. He is also the most careful. These are not unrelated facts. The four of them convened at 2 p.m. in the conference room at the end of the hall. I had not been asked to prepare anything for this meeting, which told me it was not an official meeting. I had also not been told to leave, which told me they had either forgotten I existed or decided I was not a variable they needed to manage. I was choosing to believe the second option because it was more interesting. I worked at my desk. I was extremely productive. I was also, unavoidably, positioned in the direct eye line of the conference room's glass wall, and while I was too far away to hear anything and the glass was treated to prevent it, I could see them, and what I saw over the next 40 minutes was quietly illuminating. Kang Do-ha spoke the least. When he spoke, the others listened. Not because he demanded it, he didn't, made no gestures toward authority, did not lean into the table or raise his voice. They listened because whatever he said when he said it was clearly the thing worth hearing. Yeo Sang-won had documents. Physical ones, printed, which surprised me for someone I had pegged as digital first. He laid them on the table with the precision of someone presenting evidence. His hands moved constantly while he spoke. Not nervous movement, explanatory movement. He was walking someone through something. Oh Jin-hyuk sat back in his chair with his arms crossed and said, "At a guess, less than 10 words in the full 40 minutes. His eyes moved between the other three constantly though, reading and cataloging and filing. He was the kind of listener who made people feel heard and then used everything he'd heard with complete precision. Nam Tae-jin stood at the window the whole time. His back was partially to the room. He only spoke twice, and both times, I could see it from across the floor. The other three went very still. The meeting ended at 2:48. They filed out one at a time. Nam Tae-jin last. He stopped in the doorway and looked across the floor at me. I was looking at my screen. He walked back to his office. I wrote the third rule in my notebook. Stop looking at Nam Tae-jin. I was not successful at following the third rule. On day 6, Yeo Sang-won sat on the edge of my desk. Not in a chair, on the actual desk, because he was a person to whom furniture was apparently more of a suggestion than a directive, and said conversationally, "What did you do before this?" "Administrative coordination," I said. "Prior to that, logistics analysis." "Prior to that?" "Various things." He tilted his head. His scent was bright and sharp, the kind that kept you alert. "You're interesting," he said, in the tone of someone who had said that sentence before about many things and meant it differently each time. "I'm a coordinator," I said. "I'm supposed to be invisible." "You are extremely visible," he said. "You've been here 6 days and Doha stops at your desk every morning to drop off documents. Jin-hyuk brings you coffee. Tae-jin has said more words to you than to the last 2 coordinators combined." He paused. "And I have been trying to figure out what your secondary designation actually is for 3 days." I kept my expression very calm. "Beta," I said. "It's on file." He said. "Not agreement. Not accusation. Something exactly between them, sitting there in the air between us, perfectly balanced." He looked at me with the bright, watchful eyes of someone who collected information the way other people collected sleep. Constantly, compulsively, because they couldn't function without it. "The envelope on day 4, he said. "You knew before any of us opened it." "I noticed everyone's reactions after," I said. "No," he said pleasantly. "You knew before. Your body language changed when you distributed it. I watched the footage." He said it without any particular emphasis, as if reviewing security footage of the new employee was a completely normal thing to do. "You were already braced." I looked at him. He looked at me. "Strong intuition," I said. "Professional hazard." He studied me for another 5 seconds. Then he smiled. The real one, sudden and genuine, and aimed directly at me. "Sure," he said. He slid off my desk and walked back to his office, hands in his pockets. I wrote the 4th rule. Yeo Sang-won is not someone you can misdirect. Redirect instead. Then I wrote underneath it, he might already know. I stared at that for a moment. Then I closed the notebook. On day 8, after the floor had emptied at the end of the day, Jin-hyuk appeared at my desk with his jacket over his arm and his tie loosened and the specific relaxed energy of someone who was done performing for the day and had decided the evening belonged to him. "Walk with me to the elevator," he said. I packed up my bag. We walked. He was quiet for most of it, which was unusual enough that I noticed. Jin-hyuk, in 8 days, had never been truly quiet around me. He talked, he asked things, he offered observations about the floor or the day with the easy generosity of someone who found other people genuinely interesting. The silence was different. "You're staying," he said at the elevator. I pressed the call button. "I work here. The last 3 didn't make it 2 weeks. You're on day 8. He watched the elevator numbers count down. "You're staying," he said again, and this time it wasn't a question. It was something else. Something closer to relief, shaped like a statement. "I don't quit things," I said. "Even things that are complicated?" "Especially those," I said. "Uncomplicated jobs are boring." He looked at me sideways. Something in his expression was soft in a way I hadn't seen before. Not the warmth he performed for rooms, but something that had come up without permission. "You know what's in that envelope," he said quietly. "Don't you?" The elevator opened. I stepped in. I looked at him. "I know enough," I said. The doors closed. I stood in the elevator as it descended and told my heartbeat that it needed to recalibrate immediately. It did not listen. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever was coming toward this floor, toward these 4 men who had built a fragile alliance out of mutual necessity and whatever else existed between them, I was standing at the center of it. Not because I had asked to be. Because I had sat at a desk at the exact center of a room and paid attention for 8 days, and the room had told me things whether I wanted to know them or not. Fifth rule, written on the bus home. You are already too deep in this to pretend otherwise. Decide what you're going to do about it. I stared at that one for a long time. On day 10, I arrived at 7:30 to find something on my desk that had not been there when I left the previous evening. A key card. Building access, the kind that opened the secured floor below ours, floor 18, which I had noted on my memorized building plan as listed only as archive and operations. I had not been given access to floor 18 in my onboarding. I had not asked for it. And yet here was a key card, placed at the exact center of my desk with the precise deliberateness of someone who had put it there on purpose and wanted me to understand that. There was no note. There was no indication of who had left it. I sat down. I thought about 4 people who had access to this floor after hours. I thought about which of the 4 would leave a key card without an explanation and consider that sufficient communication. I put the card in my desk drawer. At 7:53, Kang Do-ha arrived. He walked past my desk and stopped and looked at the desk and then at me. "Sleep well?" he said. It was, to my knowledge, the most personal thing he had ever said to me. "Fine," I said. "You?" He looked at me for a moment with that evaluating stillness. "Someone accessed the building at 1:14 a.m., he said. "Floor 18. I was home at 1:14 a.m., I said. "I know," he said. He went to his office. I sat with that "I know" and thought about what it meant that Kang Do-ha knew where I was at 1:14 in the morning, and whether I should be alarmed by that, and concluded that in the context of this floor and these men, it was probably closer to "I confirmed you weren't in danger than I am surveilling you," and that these two things were not entirely separate concerns either. At 9:03, Nam Tae-jin arrived. He walked past my desk. He did not look at my desk specifically. He went to his office. At 9:47 he came back out and stood at my desk and said, "The card is for your use, not an obligation." "What's on floor 18? I asked. He looked at me with the still water expression. "Things that will make more sense to you than they should," he said. "If you choose to look." I held his gaze. "Why me?" A pause. It was a short pause, but on Nam Tae-jin, a short pause was equivalent to a long silence on anyone else. "Because you already know more than you should," he said. "And you have not done anything reckless with it." He held my eyes for one more second. "That is not nothing." He went back to his office. I opened my desk drawer, looked at the card, closed the drawer. Sixth rule. The card is a test. Or an invitation. Possibly both. Do not decide what it means before you know what's on floor 18. I went on a Thursday, at 7:15 a.m., before anyone else arrived. Floor 18 was not an archive. Or rather, it was an archive, but not the kind I had imagined from the label. It was organized intelligence. The entire floor, long and open, fitted with secured filing systems, digital terminals, and physical boards covered in the kind of layered documentation that only existed when someone had been building a case or a defense over a very long period of time. 3 of the boards were facing in. I could not read them without moving around them, and I did not move around them because there was a point at which my specific gift of knowing things I wasn't meant to know became a liability rather than an asset, and I had learned the hard way to recognize that point. The 4th board was facing out, and on it, in clean, careful organization, was a map. Not a geographic map, a relational one. Names connected by lines, organizations, money flows, and at the center, circled in red, a single name. I had seen that name before, in the envelope, pressed into the paper, bleeding through. I stood in front of that board for 2 minutes. I read everything that was visible. I took nothing. I changed nothing. I turned around and went back to the elevator and wrote it up to 19 and sat at my desk and opened my calendar and began organizing the day's schedule with the steady, focused attention of someone who had just understood something very large and was choosing to hold it very quietly until they knew what to do with it. At 8:02, Kang Do-ha arrived. He looked at me. I looked at my screen. After a moment, he said, "Coffee." Not a request. Not really. More like an opening. I got up and made it. When I brought it to his office and set it on his desk, he said, without looking up, "Floor 18. "Yes," I said. And I have questions," I said. "When you're ready to answer them." He looked up then. The closed expression was not open, not quite, but something in the hinge of it had moved slightly. Like a door that had been locked from the inside for a very long time and someone had just carefully released one lock without making a sound about it. "Sit down," he said. I sat. The name on the board was Lee Won-soo. He was not a criminal, not officially. He was legitimate, or he presented as legitimate, which in this world was the same thing until it wasn't. A businessman, a developer, a man with political relationships and a clean financial record and the specific kind of public-facing respectability that took money and patience to construct. He was also the person who had arranged for the 4 syndicates to be forced into their alliance in the first place. Do-ha told me this in the way that he told me everything, economically, without decoration, in the clear, flat language of a man who had already processed his feelings about something and was now simply transmitting information. The alliance was not organic. It had been engineered. Someone had applied pressure to all 4 organizations simultaneously, in targeted ways, in a coordinated sequence, not enough to destroy any of them, but enough to make independent operation unsustainable. And then, into that pressure had come the offer. Merge. Legitimize. Operate under the Haeryun Group banner. Survive. They had all said yes because the alternative was worse. And now? I asked. Now the pressure is changing shape, Do-ha said. The envelope was a message. We have 30 days to deliver something we cannot deliver. What happens after 30 days? He looked at me. That depends, he said, on whether we find the thing he doesn't know we know. I thought about the board, about the red circle, about the specific cold patience I had felt bleeding through that envelope on my first week. There's a gap in his record, I said slowly. Isn't there? Something he thinks no one has connected. Do-ha's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened, that specific sharpening I had learned to read as the Kong Do-ha equivalent of being genuinely surprised. How? He said. Not a question. More like an intake of breath that had taken the shape of a word. The board on floor 18, I said. There's a gap in the timeline. Between 2019 and 2021. Everything before and after is connected. That section is empty. A long pause. Yes, he said. That's what you need. That's what we need, he said. I sat with that for a moment. Then, I have access to certain records, I said carefully, through channels that are not conventional. This was the understatement of my adult life. If you tell me what I'm looking for, specifically, I can look. Do-ha looked at me for a long time. I did not look away. You understand, he said. What you're offering. I understand exactly what I'm offering, I said. I'm offering it anyway. The silence in his office was very complete. Why? He said finally. I thought about it. I thought about the envelope and the cold patient intent behind it, and the 4 men on this floor and what I had seen of them in 10 days. The precision and the watchfulness and the quiet care for each other that existed underneath all the composure and all the distance, that they probably thought was invisible but was, to me, completely legible. Because what's coming for your floor isn't fair, I said. And I have a specific problem with unfair things. Do-ha looked at me. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, I'll tell Tae-jin. Tae-jin already knew. Of course he did. When Do-ha walked out of his office at 9:40 and crossed the floor and stopped in front of Nam Tae-jin's open door, because Nam Tae-jin had opened his door for the first time in 10 days, which I noted, which I thought probably meant something, and they exchanged 10 seconds of the kind of eye contact that carried full sentences, I understood that Tae-jin had expected this. Possibly had arranged it in the quiet, deliberate way that he arranged things. The key card was not a test. It was a door he had opened on purpose and then stepped back from and waited for me to walk through. I did not know how I felt about this. I filed the feeling in a compartment labeled examine later and went back to work. By noon, all 4 of them knew. I could tell by the way the floor felt. Different from the past 10 days, the tightness of an unsaid thing finally said, the specific shift in atmospheric pressure when a decision has been made and the uncertainty before it is over. Oh, Jin-hyuk came out of his office and looked at me with that soft, surprised expression he got when he hadn't expected to feel something and then did. Yeo Sang-won came out and sat on the edge of my desk and said nothing at all for almost a minute, which was, for him, effectively a very long speech. You know what you're doing? He said finally. I rarely don't, I said. He looked at me steadily. Your designation, he said. Your real one. The floor was quiet. Everyone was in their eye line of my desk. Not gathered, not dramatic, just present in the way they were present when something mattered. I looked at Yeo Sang-won, then at the others. Omega, I said. Nobody said anything. Kang Do-ha looked at his desk. Oh Jin-hyuk closed his eyes briefly. Nam Tae-jin, and I watched him specifically, I couldn't have said why, looked at me with an expression that I had never seen on his face before. Not the stillness. Something underneath the stillness. Alive and unguarded and quickly contained. But not quickly enough. The forged ID, Yeo Sang-won said. Yes. You want us to. I want nothing from you about it, I said. Except to keep working. A pause. All right, Sang-won said. He got up and went back to his office. The floor settled. I looked at my screen. I had 3 emails to send, 2 schedules to confirm, and a route into a financial archive from 2019 to 2021 to plan very carefully. The 7th rule, written at the end of the day. You are in this now. All the way. Make it count. 3 days later, Nam Tae-jin left something on my desk. Not a key card this time. Smaller. A pen cap, matte black, from the pen I had seen him use in meetings, the one he clicked exactly 3 times before he started talking, which I had noticed, which I noted that I had noticed, which I told myself was a professional observation and nothing else. There was no note. I picked it up. I turned it over. On the inside, in ink so small it required tilting toward the window light to read. Thank you. 2 words. From the man who had spent 10 days saying 11 to me. I sat with it for a long moment. Then I put it in my jacket pocket, where it remained for the rest of the day, and if I checked that it was still there approximately 4 times, that was between me and the jacket and nobody else. At 6 o'clock, when the floor was emptying, Nam Tae-jin stopped at my desk. The archive, he said. Did you find the gap? Partially, I said. I need 2 more days. He nodded. He didn't move to leave. You should have told us earlier, he said. What you are. I looked up at him. Would you have hired me if I had? A long silence. No, he said honestly. Probably not. Then I made the right call, I said. Something moved through his expression. Something I was beginning to recognize, the deep water equivalent of being moved. He looked at me with the full weight of his attention, which was, I was learning, a very different thing from the surveillance he had been doing for the first 2 weeks. Less measurement in it. More presence. When this is over, he said, and then stopped. I waited. When this is over, he said again, more quietly, I would like to have a conversation that isn't about the floor. My pulse did something I refused to describe. I'll be here, I said. I'm always early. Something changed in his face. That deep water stillness, but warm now, warm all the way through. Not the surface warming I had been cataloging. Real. Like light hitting something deep enough that you weren't sure the light was supposed to reach. He nodded once and walked to the elevator. I sat at my desk in the emptied floor and looked at the Han River through the window. Distant, moving, entirely indifferent to what was happening on the 19th floor of this building. And thought, you have survived worse. This time I believed it. In 3 days I would find the gap in Lee Won-soo's record. I would find it in a document trail that had been deliberately buried, in a subsidiary transaction that someone had assumed no one would think to trace because the tracing required access to 3 separate private financial networks that no single legitimate entity had authorization to cross-reference. I had access, through channels I will not explain. I always had. In 4 days, I would put a document on the desk of each of the 4 men on this floor and watch them read it and watch the thing that had been hanging over this alliance for 8 months begin to shift. Kang Do-ha would set his copy down and close his eyes for 2 seconds, the first time I had ever seen him do anything that looked like relief. Yeo Sang-won would read it through twice, carefully, and then look at me across the floor with an expression that was the closest thing I had ever seen to pure respect on his face. Oh Jin-hyuk would read it and his door, which had been open every day except the one, would close not from fear this time, but from the need for a moment that was private. And Nam Tae-jin would stand at his window with his back to the room, the way he always did, and he would be still for a long time. And then he would turn around and look at me, and what was in his face would not be still at all. But that was in 4 days. Right now it was evening and the floor was quiet, and I was 24 years old with a forged ID in my wallet and a pen cap in my jacket pocket and the particular feeling of someone who has walked into a room expecting nothing and found, against every calculation, something. I packed up my bag. I pulled on my jacket. And I walked to the elevator and pressed the button and thought about what it meant to be at the center of something. Not because you were placed there, not because someone needed you there, but because you chose it deliberately with full awareness of the consequences. The doors opened. I stepped in. And if you are watching this and something in your chest has been sitting up straighter for the last hour, you are exactly who this channel is for. Tell me in the comments, which one of them got to you first? Doha and his 7 words that somehow said everything. Sangwon, who knew before you told him. Jinhyuk, who watched how you take your coffee and filed it away quietly. Or Taejin, who left a thank you so small it required window light to read, and meant it more than most people mean anything. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I will see you in the next one.